Good evening and welcome to the March 27th, 2024 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take the roll?
I will. Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Denault.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks. Commissioner Lapine. Commissioner Overby.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Wagner. Chair Sullivan.
Here.
I think you have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Overby, seconded by Commissioner Boyd. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us on to item 1.3, approval of the minutes from the February 28th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Chapin, seconded by Commissioner Boyd. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That brings us on to item number 2, committee reports. Is there an update on the Mass Timber Committee?
Yeah, just real briefly, I would say that we've had a couple of meetings. That subcommittee is in motion. I'm learning along the way. I remember saying that I didn't know much about mass timber, but the group's done a nice job of explaining to me and others. We've had 2 meetings. We have a couple more scheduled, and I think the agenda is moving along pretty well. Landon's been at both meetings, as has Kobe. So we're tracking things and attending and participating, and we're in motion.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Okay.
And then I will turn it over to Mr. Bartley to give an update on the Master Plan Committee.
Yeah, so the excuse me, Comprehensive Plan Committee met last night in this room, and we had about, I think, 26 of 30 people on the committee show up, so that was a really good turnout. It was very, I would say, it was the initial meeting, so we covered a lot of logistics, tried to schedule our next committee meeting. Right now that's scheduled for Thursday, April 18th, also in this room. And so, and those are public meetings, so if anyone is, and those are 6 p.m., April 18th is the next committee meeting. And we essentially just went over the schedule, the sort of proposed timeline and committee activities. I'll just sum up really quick. April 11th is our first sort of community engagement event for non-student engagement. I mean, students are welcome too. That's the Dream Play Build workshop. There was there's a flyer up at the front podium if anyone's interested. But that's April 11th, and what the Dream Play Build workshop is essentially an interactive, hands-on workshop that's meant to help participants drill down to their core values and sort of identify their shared core values, at least in the room, and that can really help frame the conversation moving forward. So that is free, but it does require pre-registration, and I'll just tell you, we opened registration, I want to say last night, and we're almost filling up. I mean, we're getting a lot of registrations, so make sure to spread the word, and if you're interested, please register sooner than later so you can get a spot. I also wanted to let you know that along the lines of the Comp Plan Update Committee, our student group, the Urban Planning Practicum group that's come before you a couple times, they've just completed their engagement report. They just sent me a draft today. I'm very excited to look through it and have been just skimmed it before the meeting, but looks great so far. So I look forward to sharing that with you shortly, and also the next meeting will be April 24th. That group is going to come and present their findings to you. So we look forward to that. A couple items. I guess I'm just moving into staff reports. I don't think we have it in it. And the last committee report I should mention is the CD Advisory Committee, which is for CDBG block grants. And our Vice Chair, Ed Wagner, is not here today, but he's going to give a report on how the City Advisory Committee went at the next meeting. So with a calendar, I want to mention April 9th is the City Council's public hearing for the Glencairn Overlay District. The request, as you know, that this group recommended approval 6-1 at its February 28th meeting. So the city council will take that up on April 9th for a public hearing. They may make a decision that night. They don't necessarily have to, but that will be here in this room at 7 p.m. on April 9th. April 10th is a Wednesday, and that is normally a planning commission that was scheduled. We don't have business right now, so we've canceled that meeting, so you have no meeting on April 10th. April 11th is Dream Play Build, that I mentioned. Again, if you're interested, there are flyers up at the front of the room, and you can also find information at the Comprehensive Plan Update webpage, which is cityofelastlansing.com/plan update or /comprehensive plan. You choose. But people told me they don't like typing out comprehensive plan as much, so plan update it is. You can go there, and I'll just mention it's not immediately noticeable on the website, but if you click on the Get Involved button on that page, that will take you to the registration for Dream Play Build. We're making a couple changes. I invite feedback about the site or any of the process. And then just again to mention that April 24th will be your next meeting. So I think that wraps it up for my staff reports. Any questions about anything I've said?
Questions from commissioners? Seeing none. Note Commissioner Hendricks arrived at 7:11. All right, that takes us on to item number 4, commissioner announcements. Are there any announcements from commissioners? Thought you had one there for a second, no?
Well, no, it's just, I already gave my best.
Okay.
So,
Great, thank you.
all good.
On to item 5, communications from citizens. 5.1, written communications. I didn't see any in the agenda packet that were new. I see some that were attached to the applications that are up on the agenda. So we will go on to item number 5.2, verbal communication from the audience. So this is the time to come forward and address the commission on any concerns on the agenda. We are not having any public hearings tonight, so this is your opportunity to address the commission. We please ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes and identify yourself on the card that's up there. So at this point, I'm going to read off the cards I have now. Mr. Pearson, would you like to come up during your agenda item or now? Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Michael Knight, is that also for the? Okay, got it. Okay, so we can go on to Tim Rozowski for item 7.2.
Thank you. I'm Tim Rozowski. I reside at 613 Grove Street, and I here just wanted to speak to the 730 Grove rezoning request to convert to a bed and breakfast. And so I'd ask you to deny the rezoning for the reasons we've all said before, which is, the potential, once it's rezoned, the potential broad ranges of uses that it could go to. There's no guarantee it would go to the use that's described. And particularly in light of the fact that we're concerned that there could be a really premature creep to RM32 for that entire area, both the west side and the east side of the block. Particularly in light of the fact that we have a comprehensive master plan revision process going on. And then thirdly, that you may or may not be aware that I proposed a dynamite R4 category that would get us out of a lot of these issues, and so I don't know if that'll be addressed during the master plan process or not. But so moving ahead, if you are not inclined to deny it, I would ask you that you table it to obtain some additional information. And so it's not clear to me. I talked to Annette Irwin, and she really has not been involved with this process at all, so she's not really sure what the implications are of going to bed and breakfast at this site. There's been, I think when I talked to her a week or two ago, she really had no information on this, but I think she has a lot of relevant information to this conversion to what I understand is going to be a multifamily Class B license. And then secondly, also to talk to Scott Weaver from the building department. You may know that I serve on the Building Board of Appeals. And I think a change of use from what is really a duplex, as I understand it, it's a duplex right now, to a multifamily has considerable code implications. And so today I attended an all-day meeting from 8:30 to 4 o'clock on the existing building rehab code for Michigan. And this would constitute a change of use if it's classified as a multifamily, which triggers a number of building code changes. This is not really planning or zoning, but these are building code changes. All of this leads me to believe that there's a foreseeable possibility that this property will never be used as a bed and breakfast, that they may obtain the benefit of going to RM32, the economic benefit, but with no ever assurance that that actually ends up as a bed and breakfast. So I would ask you to consider tabling and really getting some information from the building department and the housing department on really the implications of doing this. I believe in my heart that the applicant may find that it's not economically viable to convert this to a bed and breakfast because, for one, he'll sacrifice his year-long rental lease, and that's, there's an economic benefit of having, a student lease. So will it turn out, if you rent this, say, for a couple of weekends a month, plus you have the cost of leasing, advertising, maybe buying bagels from Big Apple Bagel if their food is going to be served, will that actually balance off the economic losses of foregoing the rental licenses? I don't believe it will. So I think it's reasonably foreseeable that this will never happen as a B&B, regardless of, I believe their intent right now is to do that, but will it happen? So there are some alternative approaches. One is to, I've made this comment before to City Council, that I think there's a viable path to simply going to the ZBA, and because ZBA has the power under their powers language in the zoning ordinance of sub-item 2B, I think it is, they have the ability to address address uses that are not defined in the ordinance. So we know that the bed and breakfast is not defined in the ordinance. So I believe ZBA has the ability to address this and maybe allow for a B&B or bed and breakfast without the need to rezone the property. So I think the applicant potentially can get what they want. Secondly, I think that the property has two licenses right now, an R4 for one unit and an R1 for another unit. That's my understanding. There's nothing in East Lansing requirements that dictates the length of a lease. So somebody currently can do a short-term lease, Airbnb, if they have an existing rental license. I think if there's no on-site monitor, there's no food served. I'm not sure what the difference is between a bed and breakfast and a bed. I think somebody commented on that last time. So couldn't he just do what he wants to do under his existing license? I think potentially he could convert the Class 1 license to a Class 4 license, and he could rent this as two separate units, which is what I heard on the last Planning Commission, that his intent is to have essentially two units that are leased. So I think he could do that currently, certainly for the one unit, without a rezoning. And then if he gets the other unit rezoned from Class 1 to, or reclassified from Class 1 to Class 4, he could do the second unit as well. Some of the questions you got to ask or should ask Scott Weaver and Annette Irwin are, one, does he need to go to Housing Commission to reclassify the license? Secondly, is an all trades inspection will be required, and will code change, or will the building have to be improved to comply with the codes for multifamily? I think that's a very important question because it all impacts the economics. Will the property meet the zoning requirements? So will parking be configured as such and such? So there's a lot of process questions that I think you can get help from both Scott Weaver and from Annette Irwin. So I would urge you to do, if you're inclined to approve it, please table it, get more information. Or secondly, if you are not inclined to do either of those, could you please define what the process is for reconverting the property back, set some timelines okay, thank you.
On to the next card, Deborah Ann Stewart.
Thank you for the opportunity for us to communicate together this evening. I also wish to support the comments that neighbor Professor Tim Marzowski just made. You have a letter from our family which is in page 29 of your packet, or 59 if you're going through the entire material. Just a few quick points in summary. The Stewart family, myself, Deborah Ann Stewart, 64-year resident of Grove Street. James Stewart and Joffrey Stewart are also property owners. Our Stewart family letter is continuing to support for maintaining College Grove as a historic district by maintaining the current R2 single-family zoning for 730 Grove Street, and therefore at this time denying the request for rezoning from R2 to RM32 zoning. And we wish that you will wait for more appropriate zoning codes to go through approval procedures, that which Mr. Mrzowski just commented upon. I appreciate the opportunity for us to communicate, to get new ideas, and that's partly why I came this evening. I did want to share, since being with you a month ago, talking to residents that are new to the area. There were two families with infant children walking down Grove Street, new residents to Ridge Road, that we're excited are having more children in the area, and now 5 children in the 600 block of Grove. Certainly single professionals and LGBTQ family, which we've had in the past next to my residence, are welcome, and we're the type of community which welcomes an entire community. But my concern is, if a business were to move into the area, how residential property family members would feel about its effects. I think I mentioned I wish Dad were with us. Roger Stewart was a property tax appeals consultant and gave many years, over 15 years, on the Zoning Board of Appeals, which Mr. Mrzowski just pointed you to. In summary, I do hope that you'll also consider what's happening with the traffic. From observing the student being hit by a hit-and-run driver on November 13th, I continue to be concerned about that area. And if we were to add persons who are unfamiliar with the area into the mix of the current traffic condition, particularly between 2:30 and 3:15 on Bircham Road, I think it continues to be a hazard to pedestrians. Thank you for your time, and continue to be concerned about the area, and appreciate each of your efforts and time to address our ideas. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to come forward?
Short and sweet. I'm Lisa Hominick. I live at 222 Ridge Road, and I would support Ms. Stewart's, Mr. Mrzowski's opposition to this again. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. I am Lori Zawacki, and I am Mike Zawacki's mom. He is the person that's trying to get the approval for the 730 Grove. My intent here tonight is to just kind of give you a little bit more of a personal vision that I've observed over the years as he's tried to, as he's moved into this place and tried to see what he can make out of it the best that he can. And he moved in there after, bought the house and moved in there after he graduated from college. And what do most people do when they buy a house like that and they want to make it work for them? They rent it. Fast forward 15, 17 years, and he's now thinking, what can I do? He loved this house. This house is a beautiful house. And architecturally, it's really, really gorgeous, and he just appreciates that, and it's standing within the community, within the neighborhood there. And 15 years later, he's thinking, okay, what can this house do for me and for the community and for the city? And his thought was, well, if it can be opened up more for more people to enjoy it, more people to see this absolutely beautiful house, it would be really cool to elevate it, and instead of it being students, it would be the target audience would be more like parents of students, might be professionals in the community. You've got one B&B already there, and you've got hotels and so forth. This would be an opportunity for the parents of the sororities that are in that area, the parents of professionals that come to MSU for different functions, to be able to have a really unique place to come and stay. And it offers a draw for the community because it's the kind of place where you can put pamphlets out there, you can refer them to the different possibilities for activities going on in East Lansing at MSU, all those different kinds of things, and there can be a foyer in each area that refers them to all those things. The food can be supplied, from different community organizations, bakeries, different, if you're talking about adults, not students, so you're talking about, different aspects of what adults might like to see and enjoy in the neighborhood. And it does have an architectural significance. It is a house that is influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, and if you haven't seen it, it is a beautiful home. And to bring adults in and to bring community members in would be, actually, you would probably be catering to a better clientele in the community, because the house has to be, for students, they're hard on homes, they're hard on those settings, so that the house would then be outside and inside kept up to a higher level, I think, so that it is appealing. People want to come and they want to rent a place there, rent a room there or a level there. And I think that kind of thing would be elevating not only the house and making the community, helping the community to see it as a really lovely place to be, but it's a draw for the community to use that Frank Lloyd Wright inspired idea to bring people in that wouldn't normally have access to a home like that or be able to stay in that. I think it would be lovely. I think the parents of students in that area would love doing that. And if for some reason it didn't work, it goes right back to where he is right now. So it's
1 minute remaining.
So it's like how can you lose on it? It's kind of like, well, it's a business opportunity, and it's an opportunity for the city and for the community. He loves this community. He loves the neighborhood. He has friends in the neighborhood as well, and he wants it to be a positive thing for everybody, the neighborhood, the city, and himself. So I think that approving this would really be a positive thing in general. So I hope that you do consider that and pass it for him. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward? Thank you. Anyone online in the queue?
We have nobody waiting in the queue.
All right. Thank you. That brings us on to item number 6, public hearings. There are none. So item number 7.1, consideration of ordinance 1527. Mr. Bartley, would you like to lead this one off?
Yes, thank you. This is ordinance 1527 is a request from George F. Eyde Family LLC and Leo Brown Group LLC to rezone a 2.29 acre vacant parcel. This is immediately north and east of, and to be combined with an existing parcel at 3512 Coolidge Road. This is just southeast of the intersection of Coolidge and Coleman, northern tier of town. The existing zoning of the 2.29 acre parcel, vacant parcel, that you can see on the screen is DeWitt Township A, which is DeWitt Township Agricultural. The reason this is DeWitt Township is because many years ago there was a 425 agreement where some parcels were transferred from DeWitt Township to the City of East Lansing. The 425 agreement allows the Planning Commission zoning authority, so you are essentially, if the applicant wants to use the property and combine it with the other property to the south and west, they need to change the zoning to match that, which is B1, General Business Office District, and so you can change the zoning as requested, or I should say recommend change, approval of the zone change to City Council. The intended use, I guess I'll preface that by saying the intended use isn't really material to the rezoning request, but I can tell you that the existing use in the B1 parcel at 3512 Coolidge is a geriatric facility. I believe it's a inpatient psychiatric facility, and the intent would be to expand that facility, as you can see in some conceptual site plans in your packet. Again, though, I guess I just want to warn you that, you know, the rezoning question is to do with the parcel itself and not the intended use or site plan, but you can certainly keep that in mind as you consider this proposal. The new parcel, the new child parcel, or I guess to be combined with the existing parcel, 2.29 acres currently would not meet the lot division, land division ordinance, and so would need to be combined with that parcel, the B1 parcel to the southwest, in order to facilitate future development. So we did have a public hearing for this in November of last year, and there were no comments in support or in opposition of this project. And then the applicant had requested a delay for a variety of external reasons. So I know that the applicant is here today and can speak to their request. Are there any questions for me at this point?
Questions for Mr. Bartley? No, I have some for the applicant, but I will, maybe if there are more for you, I'll let you answer those when they're up here. Okay. So at this point, we'll bring forward the applicant if they're here.
Good evening. David Pearson on behalf of Leo Brown Group and George F. Eyde Family LLC, who applied for this rezoning. Where have we been since November? And the answer is working on the certificate of need. So in order to know what the facility could do, the issue is determining the number of beds under the certificate of need. That's settled. We had hoped to have a full site plan in time for you to be able to consider this tonight with the rezoning, but the engineering couldn't be completed, again, because it was delayed getting started while the certificate of need was settled. What it means now is the current facility has 23 beds. The expansion has a certificate of need to expand to 71 beds. And the site plan which we've given you, which does not include the final engineering details that you'll need for full site plan review, does, however, show you what the building with the addition will look like in terms of the outline. And then we've also provided renderings, and both of those will be part of the full site plan submittal. So those are things which don't have all the details, but clearly show you what would be there. It's a little bit different, and I guess the other reason we're here tonight is to find out whether there are issues with the rezoning. We would have pulled it and just let it go with the full site plan, but wanted to see if there were any issues that came up separately with the rezoning. From the summary that's been given in the staff report, essentially it's the same staff report that you saw before. I'll try and keep it short, but I realize it's been 4 months, so just a couple of points I would mention. I know, having done this for a few years, when you're doing rezoning, you should consider all possible uses. The difference here is both under the Land Division Act and under your zoning code, the 80 feet that's being added can't be used independently for anything else. You need at least 100 feet of frontage in the B1 to do anything. And it has to be a adjacent parcel transfer under the Land Division Act because it can't meet the 4-to-1 ratio that's required as a separate parcel under the Land Division Act. I guess the other things I would mention, as just to touch on them as shown in the staff report, it is consistent with the staff, with the comp plan, which does allow for and say that extended care and nursing facilities would be appropriate for this area. It's consistent with the surrounding uses. You have office, including medical offices, on the opposite side of Coolidge Road. You have the existing facility to the south, and then the Willows immediately to the south of that. To give you a little more detail, we do have tonight, Michael Knight is here. He's the CEO and runs the current facility and would as well run the expanded facility. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but if I think you have a card from him, he could tell you a little bit more about what actually goes on here, which might help.
Sounds good.
Holt, currently the CEO of Brightwell Behavioral Health, located currently at 3512 Coolidge. I'm a 20-year Army retiree, psychiatric nurse, passion for behavioral health. Really just want to thank the Commission for considering this expansion. It really does give us a chance to help more patients and bring more jobs to East Lansing. I think we're uniquely situated at kind of the corner of 3 major interstates in Michigan to not just help people locally, but to also bring in people from around the state for a much needed resource of inpatient psychiatric treatment. So just again, want to thank the Commission and happy to answer any questions that they might have.
Sue said that, or Mr. Pearson said that you were getting your CON approval. Can you speak a little bit about what type of services the facility will be providing and what you were approved for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently provide, we have 23 inpatient beds that are currently allocated for geriatric patients. We've been awarded 32 additional beds from the state, so that has been already approved. We're basically just waiting on this approval and the expansion to be able to provide care for, again, 32 more patients, ranging from adults up to geriatrics as well.
Any additional questions from commissioners? Since Commissioner Denault.
This is more of a question, I think, about the proposed expansion of the facility, and less, I think, about your services. And so I'm happy to defer to someone else. But I noticed driving around the property and then looking at the 2 renderings that you do provide that I understand are not fully from an engineer yet. But I did notice on one of the renderings, the proposed facility might impact some trees along the back side. Do you envision that you would have to remove any mature trees for the proposed expansion?
Yeah, so as a nurse, I'm going to defer
to
someone with a little bit more expertise.
I was like, oh, wait.
Happy to answer those questions, but I'll defer for sure.
Hi, Troy Birch, Leo Brown Group, 802 East 86th Street, Indianapolis. We are the developer and owner of the property currently, so we developed the current facility back in 2020 and 2021. We are aware that there are some trees on the site. Because of the expansion going eastward and the detention, there will be some trees lost. However, we will make a commitment to keep as many of them as we can within the site plan.
Would it be possible for us to see some completed engineering renderings, I think before making our decision? Just to see how many mature trees are being impacted, right? I think that's a decision that we shouldn't take lightly.
Sure. We have not started the master planning of the civil engineering yet because we wanted to get through this. So we have not started overlaying the detention pond yet, site utilities, we haven't even started grading yet. So it really is the site plan that you have in the packet is as far as the engineering has taken it. But there will definitely be a plan in the civil plans that show any trees that would be removed through the site plan approval process.
So just in general, could you give an overview of of what you're still finalizing as far as the site plan is concerned?
Sure. So we have the footprint of the building pretty much finalized. There may be some tweaks, but as far as overall size, the building will remain consistent. From a grading perspective, from a site utilities layout perspective, from a drainage perspective, we have not developed those plans yet. So we worked with Kebs Engineering to do a very, very high-level assessment of the site to make sure that there is enough room for the detention that we would need. But beyond that, we have not done any of, you've all seen the plans, the civil sets that are, 15, 20 pages. We've got one page right now. So we have some back of napkin sketches just to make sure that we can fit what we need on the site, but nothing's been developed further.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Bartley?
I just want to add that, or I guess remind the commission that it's certainly within your purview to consider trees, but I would suggest that consideration would be better at the site plan review stage versus the rezoning. In other words, the rezoning would not affect the trees, the development would. So I'd wait until the development proposal to really focus on the trees too much. That said,
Right.
you will have the opportunity because an expansion of this use, if the rezoning is approved and goes through, an expansion will require planning commission review and approval. So you'd certainly have that chance.
That was going to be my comment or question, and then I'll kick it over.
I don't want to ever discourage you, though,
Chapin.
from being concerned about trees. So.
Always concerned about trees.
And Commissioner Nadeau, I will let you know our logo is actually a tree. If you look on the last 2 pages there, so we are very aware, and we'll make those updates.
So just to reiterate your comments, we only have a rezoning proposal that's before us, and a site plan will come before us and be reviewed later. So really, that's all that's under our consideration. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, so I want to get back to the people. How many additional people will you be able to serve in the new expanded facility?
32 more.
32 more people would have access to upgraded services through your facility that are in need of psychiatric help and support, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good point. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion unless, I don't know, Cynthia,
Please
you
do.
made a great motion the other day, or last
She's-
time we were,
she
I'm
is-
happy to do it. Here we
She
go.
is the best at the motions.
Here we go. Cynthia is. You want to go have at it, Cynthia? Or,
Sure, I can do that. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval by the East Lansing City Council of the request from George F. Eyde Family LLC and Leo Brown Group LLC to rezone a 2.29 acre portion of a vacant parcel, 19-20-50-36-300-46, immediately north and east of, and to be combined with 3512 Coolidge Road from DeWitt Township Agricultural to B1 General Office Business District.
I second.
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Chapin. Any discussion on that motion? Discussion about what's before us before we take a potential vote? Any comments? I have a few I can add, but defer to the commission first.
I think there's several additional pieces to this, but I think to move this forward tonight, to support a community resource that I would deem as very valuable and important, this seems like just a necessary step towards allowing that facility to be constructed. I'm in support.
Any additional comments? I second that, so I think that the zoning is appropriate, the use is appropriate, it's needed. I also like that we're updating zoning from some annexed land there to bring it into our city's zoning. So, and we get to see the site plan and have a conversation about that potentially down the line. So I am also in support. So any additional comments or questions?
I just will add my support. This seems like an appropriate need and a relevant use of this property, which is abutting up to the current facility. And what I've seen of the site plan and their proposal, it sounds like it's a sound use of this, and it will benefit the community.
Great. Thank you. Seeing no additional comments, I think we can just do this one on a voice vote. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Seeing none, motion carries. Unanimous vote. Thank you. That brings us on to item 7.2, consideration of ordinance 1529, the proposed conditional rezoning of 730 Grove Street for use as a Class B multiple family dwelling. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. And I just want to mention that the next steps for that rezoning would be to go to City Council, where they will take your recommendation into account and make a determination on the rezoning.
Thank you.
This item, ordinance 1529, is a conditional rezoning request to rezone 730 Grove Street from, that would be the current zoning is R2, medium density, single family residential district. The proposed zoning is RM32, city center, multiple family residential district. The request is conditional rezoning of that property for use as a Class B multifamily dwelling, which is the applicant's proposed use is a bed and breakfast. Unfortunately, our code doesn't quite have a very clear definition or any definition of bed and breakfast right now. So where it has been applied in the past, for example, the Wild Goose Inn downtown East Lansing has been governed as a Class B multiple family dwelling. So that's why we're bringing this forward as a Class B multiple family dwelling. But unfortunately for the applicant, Class B multiple family dwelling is not permitted in the R2 zone district. It is a special use within the RM32 zone district. And I mentioned that because this is a conditional rezoning request. However, even if the rezoning goes through, conditionally or not, and is approved by City Council, the applicant would still need to return to the Planning Commission and City Council for approval of the use. So just keep that in mind. But the rezoning request today would be conditioned upon that use being approved, the property being used as a bed and breakfast. And what's special about conditional rezonings is that if the property ceases to be used for that land use as conditioned, then the rezoning, a reversion would go into effect where staff would bring this back to the Planning Commission and say, okay, it's no longer a bed and breakfast, we need to revert back to R2 zoning. I just want to mention a couple more things. Number one, Mr. Rozowski earlier mentioned Annette Irwin, the Planning, Building, and Development Director, and she is available tonight here in the audience. If you have questions about rental licensing, she can certainly talk about that much more eloquently and accurately than I can. And also, I just wanted to mention that the applicant, Michael Zawacki, has submitted a request to the Historic District Commission to expand the College Grove Historic District, which is adjacent to this property to the south and east, but does not include the property right now. So he has requested that the College Grove Historic District is expanded. That's not material to the rezoning request, but it gives you an idea of their intent for the use of the property, largely because there have been concerns expressed about the potential uses of the property down the road or demolition of the house, and having the property in a historic district would add one more very significant level of review to any potential future development proposals. So with that, can I answer any questions? You saw this at a public hearing a couple of months ago, and there has been some neighborhood opposition. We've heard some support, but largely opposition from neighbors, especially those to the north along Ridge Road. And you've heard some opposition tonight. So I think that's it for me, summing up, but I'd love to answer your questions if there are some.
Commissioner Overby.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Rakowski suggested that we postpone a decision. So what would that mean procedurally, and would postponing a decision really give us additional information to help us make this decision now?
Postponing a decision tonight with the intent, I guess, of postponing a decision until after the comprehensive plan update is completed.
Which is a year.
Is likely about a year. Yeah. So that would certainly, and I guess I would also add that I don't expect that at the end of the comp plan process we'll be seeing an immediate implementation. Beyond that, we'd want to, after the comp plan update process is finished, then we start to go into implementation. One implementation step could be to change zoning of properties, to change our zoning ordinance to have, say, new districts, such as the R4 district that Mr. Mrozowski mentioned, which is a new district. So we'd have that opportunity to change the zoning ordinance at that point. I would imagine that would be at least a year and a half, 2 years out. So postponing a decision tonight would essentially postpone the applicant's request significantly.
For 12 or 18 months or longer?
I think that's accurate.
Just add a couple comments to that, because the master plan just essentially dictates what the future rezoning looks like. So you actually would have to go through and rezone those parcels as well. So, and as you know, or as you've heard, the master plan is essentially our guiding document. So there has been somewhat of a narrative out there that is, some folks don't like the designations in the master plan, and we should ignore that and wait for it to be updated. But that's kind of like saying you don't like the law and you should wait for the law to be updated before it's like that's what we have to go off of until there's actually public feedback and a redoing of that master plan. So that's how I view it, anyways. But certainly there is going to be ample opportunity for the public to weigh in when there's the master plan review process, and that's what it's intended to do. So
I'll mention that the 2018 future land use map, which I pulled up on the screen, designate this property and those to the south and east and across the street as R4, which is residential up to 16 units per acre, but that does not match the R2 zoning.
That's because of the use, right? Because of how they want to use it as a bed and breakfast, right?
Well, so the future land use map is saying it could be residential up to 16 units, but the current zoning didn't change in 2018 to be a zone district that would be comparable, I guess, to the master plan designation.
I had a question about one of the concerns that Mr. Mrozowski raised about them potentially deciding not to use this as a bed and breakfast. So my understanding of the language is it's a conditional rezoning, so that wouldn't be an option, right? So if they decide that that's not something they want to use, it essentially would revert back to its previous zoning.
Correct. I think the wrinkle here, or the difficulty, is because we don't have a clear definition in the zoning ordinance of bed and breakfast. Our sort of closest approximation is Class B multiple family dwelling. Class B multiple family dwellings can include other uses besides bed and breakfast. A Class B multiple family dwelling is essentially just shared kitchen facilities. So each individual unit doesn't have its own cooking area. So a frat house and sorority, for example, would be examples of also other examples of Class B multifamily. Now that said, I guess I want to be clear that I'm not saying that the applicant could open up a frat house if this were approved, either the rezoning or the use, because if the conditional rezoning is passed this evening, then it would be a recommendation to City Council. If they approve the conditional rezoning, it would be for a Class B multiple family dwelling, which would then need to come back to you for a specific use approval. The specific use approval would be for a Class B multifamily dwelling acting as a bed and breakfast. And therefore, down the road, if that Class B multifamily dwelling acting as a bed and breakfast changed its use, at that point we'd have to look at reverting the zoning. I'm gonna really work on my explanations, because I know I'm not doing the best here. I'm thinking about last time with the knits and foot candles, and I'm going to try to be very careful when we get into that at the next item. But for now, I think I'm covering it.
I think the ordinances are kind of confusing, so I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Any additional comments or questions? Commissioner Boyd?
So if the conditional use is set for a bed and breakfast,
how does that get policed so we can know that it's actually being a bed and breakfast, let's say 2 years from now?
Complaints. And I would expect we'd have some fairly vigilant neighbors. But also the property would need to be licensed annually by the city with a rental license. So I think that you'd have that inspection. If the inspection didn't happen because something was changing, that would be a big red flag too.
So an example, the day that we get our thing reviewed, we're actually a bed and breakfast, but 6 months from then, we turn it into something else, and then every year when we get our review, we're a bed and breakfast. How does that work?
I'm sorry, can you ask
So
me?
if you're doing an annual review to make sure it's a bed and breakfast, and on the day we're doing the review, we're actually a bed and breakfast, and then later on, another month or two, we're change it into something different, and then annual review comes up again, and we're a bed and breakfast again. How does that, I mean, obviously we talk about complaints from the neighborhood. How fast would that change if we needed to get it changed?
I mean, if we learn that the use has changed, our typical process would be reach out and say, hey, is this, what's going on? Let's check this out. If we find out and determine that, yes, the use has actually changed, at that point we'd go into enforcement. We'd give them a grace period of a couple weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, to remedy the situation, and then if it hasn't been at that point, we'd say you're in violation. We'd take action to change the zoning back. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Others?
Commissioner Williams.
Thanks. One of the conditions that was part of this proposal was that this be a non-owner occupied bed and breakfast or inn. And I noticed that in your staff report, in the proposed motion to approve, you took out the alternative or inn, which I think is helpful because that was confusing to me in particular. I'm wondering, though, about the non-owner occupied proposed condition. Does that mean that if the owner decided that he was going to operate this more like a typical bed and breakfast where the owner actually lives there, that he'd be in violation of the conditions and it would revert back or trigger a city process?
That's a good question. And I don't know if I can answer that tonight. I really want to, though. Let me think on this.
Comments or questions for Mr. Bartley?
He's thinking.
I'm just looking for phoning a friend.
Phoning a friend.
I'm wondering,
Yeah.
you know, I think that the applicant offered, I guess, the non-occupied, owner-occupied part of the conditions. The state definition of bed and breakfast includes being owner-occupied. Although local zoning, I guess, supersedes the state's definition. Did you hear the question of this?
I believe I did. So my understanding is that the applicant has put the condition or made the condition that the property
That is
would be used
non-owner
only as non-owner occupied bed and breakfast. So that's the owner making that condition. Certainly the commission would be able, I think, to expand upon that or discuss that with the applicant to make it broader, that it could be owner occupied.
For what it's worth, if this were to be recommended for approval tonight and the city council considers it and approves it, the next step would be to create the conditional rezoning agreement between the city and the applicant, at which point we kind of hammer out the exact wording of the conditions based on what the approval is. Now, it wouldn't be substantively different, but I think that where we'd run into potential issues down the road, that might be something we'd remove at that point or change. You mentioned the removal of the word inn, and we did that for just that reason. Inn is considered defined like a hotel or motel, and hotels and motels are not allowed in RM32. So, and I talked to the applicant about this and said, look, I think, inn's out. So is that good? he understands a bed and breakfast being a Class B multifamily dwelling is the use that he's proposing, and that does not include inn. So.
I think it's an excellent flag, though, and I think it's certainly something we should bring up to the applicant. So before we do that, any additional comments or questions for city staff? Seeing none, we're ready for the applicant. You guys can come up and answer a few questions.
Mike Zawacki, the owner and applicant at 730 Grove Street. I was just going to read off some things, some reasons why it would be a compelling decision to approve the bed and breakfast at 730 Grove Street with the specific conditions set forth. First, its architectural significance. The fact that the house was designed by architect Robert Pond, a protege of Frank Lloyd Wright, adds significant architectural value to the property. Frank Lloyd Wright's influence is renowned worldwide, and having a home designed by one of his proteges in East Lansing is a unique opportunity. By converting it to a bed and breakfast, the architectural beauty and historical significance of the house can be preserved and celebrated. Secondly, the enhanced community appeal. Converting the house into a bed and breakfast would not only benefit the property itself, but also the surrounding neighborhood and community. Bed and breakfast establishments often attract visitors who seek a more personal and immersive experience during their stay. By offering a unique and architecturally significant accommodation option, East Lansing would become more appealing to tourists and travelers, potentially boosting local businesses and contributing to the overall economic growth in the area. The next one is preservation of heritage. The current use of the house is as an owner-occupied student rental. Owner plus, there's plus 5 total, and that may not fully showcase its architectural significance. By rezoning it as a bed and breakfast, the house can be transformed into a space that allows visitors to experience and appreciate its unique design. Preserving the heritage of the house by showcasing its architectural features and history would contribute to the cultural identity of East Lansing and promote a sense of pride among the community. The fourth would be the increased tourism and revenue. East Lansing is a vibrant college town and a constant influx of visitors, including families, alumni, and prospective students. Converting the house into a bed and breakfast would provide an additional accommodation option for these visitors, especially those who are interested in architectural history. This would result in increased tourism, longer stays, and additional revenue for local businesses, including restaurants, shops, and attractions. Lastly, it would have a positive impact on the neighborhood. The conversion of the house into a bed and breakfast would have a positive impact on the surrounding neighborhood. It would certainly not create more traffic, but probably much less. It would help maintain the residential character of the area while adding a unique and culturally significant attraction. Bed and breakfast establishments often bring a sense of charm and community engagement. This would foster a sense of pride and connection among the residents in East Lansing. In conclusion, rezoning the house at 730 Grove Street to a bed and breakfast would preserve its architectural significance, enhance its community appeal, preserve heritage, attract tourism and revenue, and have a positive impact on the neighborhood. This decision would not only benefit the property itself, but also contribute to the overall cultural and economic development in East Lansing. Touching on, any opposition to, if any addition, other uses that, that are just completely not my intention at the property. With this application and the conditions set forth, that just can't happen. The conditions set forth that it would have to be used as a bed and breakfast, I think that's pretty clear at this point by now. Thank you for your time. And any questions you have?
Could you address the issue that Commissioner Williams had raised about it being non-owner occupied? What is the intent there, and why was that language landed on?
About it being non-owner occupied? To be used just like the Wild Goose bed and breakfast is used as far as if I ever wanted to move back in, and I think I'd have to come back and ask for that. Because it's a condition that would be set forth.
So
But
just
I think I'd have to come back to
to
council and
clarify,
ask.
did
Yeah.
you ask for the language to say non-owner
Yes.
occupied? You did?
Yeah.
And that's your preference?
Yeah, that would be my preference, yeah.
Okay.
Just like the wild goose,
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how they operate.
non-owner occupied, yep.
Any additional questions from commissioners? I just somebody.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not a commissioner, but I wanted to ask a clarifying question, I guess,
You're not.
is, you said non-owner occupied, but would, the Wild Goose, I think, has a full-time innkeeper or bed and breakfast keeper?
Yes,
Who
that would be
stays
my
on site.
intention.
And that would be the intention, because this
Absolutely.
wouldn't be an owner. So you'd have somebody on site.
Oh, is that considered, however that's considered, it would be
But
the
it's
same
not-
way.
Okay, so somebody would be a caretaker, they may not be the owner, though. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure I understood that.
I think they're saying that the owner specifically, per this language, can't be the caretaker that occupies it. You can have a caretaker, but you can't have.
You could
the
have a
owner of
live-in
the property
caretaker.
living there.
That caretaker doesn't have to be the owner.
And they don't have to be on premises? That's what I was going to ask. A caretaker who lives there, or someone who comes in and cleans and prepares the rental? Those are two very different things, to me.
Sure.
So which is your intention?
I guess I hadn't fully considered it. I'm open for either, honestly. Can I say that? Can I leave it at that? Yeah.
And these kind of questions, I think, are illustrative. I mean, because you'd be looking at a conditional rezoning, you want to make sure your conditions are nailed down. But you also would have another bite at this kind of, these kind of questions, I guess, if and when the special use comes back to you for the use.
Commissioner Williams?
I guess the struggle for me is that I'm still having trouble with the condition. Because to me, a bed and breakfast has a owner occupying it, as opposed to a short-term rental, which does not. So it almost seems to me like you're kind of mixing the language, and I'm having a hard time understanding what it is you're really proposing. So it sounds like you're not going to be living there, and you're going to be renting it out, either room by room or floor
Level.
by floor.
By floor.
By floor.
2 floors by floor, yep. That'd be the intention, yep. With a caretaker.
But a caretaker doesn't like have a place to live inside the residence?
I honestly haven't thought about it that much. I guess they could, absolutely.
I think of a bed and breakfast as
Sure.
having a host.
Sure.
A
Yeah.
resident host who hosts the breakfast and welcomes the guests, as opposed to a short-term rental where you have a lockbox and you get a key and you let yourself in.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to understand, what your concept is.
Sure. How's the wild goose done?
I'm not confident enough to be able to answer for sure. I guess I'm wondering, Commissioner Williams, if how you'd feel about rewording that condition to say the property shall only be used as a bed and breakfast occupied by a host or caretaker per the applicant.
Well, I really I don't have a preference. I just want to understand what the applicant's condition is. I want to understand what it is we're being asked,
That makes sense.
what the condition is that we're being asked to approve, and I'm still kind of struggling with
But I
it.
guess my thinking behind changing that condition that way would be if the non-owner occupied verbiage is the problem, then removing that, we can say we want it to be occupied by somebody. It doesn't have to be an owner, but a caretaker or host should be occupying that building, if that's what you're looking for as a condition. Or if you're
Again, I'm just
you're
trying,
looking for
what I'm
clarity.
looking for is to understand what the proposal is, what
And-
the proposed condition is. It's not about what I prefer or don't prefer. I'm just trying to understand what we're being asked to approve.
And didn't you say it would come back to the planning commission for those?
It would.
For
So-
those ironing out of?
So I guess the conditions are still offered by you as conditions of this rezoning if it were to be approved. So because non-owner occupied bed and breakfast was a condition that you offered, we want to make sure that we're addressing each condition as offered before making a decision. So we can certainly iron out some details about the operation and the plan. But as far as these conditions, it's totally a good thing to be going through them at this point.
Let me ask that a different way. So say this is approved, council approves it, the next application comes through, everything's approved.
Yeah.
You're given the green light to do this. How will you be operating it? Will you be living there personally, or will you be having
No.
somebody else live there, or will no one live there?
No one lived, not me living there. I haven't, like I said, I haven't thought about possibly someone else living there. The caretaker, obviously.
Okay.
Like I said, I haven't thought about it that much, but I'm open to, obviously, one way or another, you know, if that mattered, you know, for its approval, then I'm open. I'm fine with that, yeah.
So
That
what
makes sense.
I'm hearing is you want this to read like with whatever gives you the greatest chance to get this approved.
Yes, because I haven't thought about it. Because I haven't made a decision one way or another. So if there's a preference, you know, then I'm open for that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Commissioner.
What concerns me is that this isn't our decision, and this is not our proposal.
Sure.
It's yours.
Yep.
So I think Cynthia was trying to make the same point, is that we need to know what it is that you want to do, and then we can make a decision based
Sure.
on that information. And there's some things here that to me are not clear. And you know, will there be an innkeeper, and what will that person do, and how will you manage this property when you are not living there?
Sure.
So those are concerns that I have right now.
Yeah. And by leaving it as just non-owner, doesn't that just leave open? That just essentially means I won't be living there, which is correct in what I want, I guess. Yeah.
But the issue is we do not have an ordinance that specifies what a bed and breakfast is, and so we're kind of left to make that determination. And then still, given the language that exists here, there's no requirement for anyone to live there with the way that this is worded. So
Right.
was there a question down here?
There was,
Well,
but
okay.
I'll defer.
Okay, I'll defer too if you want.
There's a defer off. Yeah.
I'll go ahead then.
All right, Commissioner Nault.
You know, it sounds to me, I think I agree with some of my fellow commissioners that it seems to me that you maybe just don't have your business plan sort of worked out yet for how the
Yeah.
B&B will operate. And I guess maybe a question and or suggestion.
Sure.
Since we are talking so much about how this property might compare in its operation to the Wild Goose Inn,
Yeah.
have you spoken to the owners of the Wild Goose Inn to talk a little bit about how they operate and what their business model is in order to maybe gain some insight into how you might operate your property?
No, but I've talked to people that have stayed there, and it's I don't believe they have an innkeeper. They have some, but they have an innkeeper, but not one that lives on premises. It was what I was told.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the Wild Goose Inn, but I think that from what I know, from what I've heard you referring to is either, and it could go either way, either somebody that's managing it, whether they're on the premises or not. It can be physically set up that somebody can live there and be a caretaker in that house.
Yeah, it is.
So you could do it that way if that's what people were made
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or it could be a management company that is managing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, actually,
Commissioner Chapin.
I was going to reference the business plan as well, so we were thinking the same way. So I think you've said some really nice things about the property, as your mother did as well.
Sure.
It's clear that you cherish the property, you want to do something more with it. Honestly, I'm not comfortable approving anything tonight, just because I think there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions, and this is process. I mean, this is why we have this process in place, so that people have to come to the podium and answer the questions that we ask. I'm very uncomfortable maybe we postpone, but I cannot approve what's in front of us tonight based on, the neighbors that responded to this as well, and their thinking coupled with the way you've answered some of the questions tonight just doesn't feel quite right for me as one commissioner, but I appreciate how you presented the property, its historic value, your appreciation for the community and the neighborhood. Those things came through loud and clear. I just think that how this connects to the bigger picture in the city of East Lansing just doesn't feel right to me tonight.
Sounded kind of like a motion to
Well, I
quite.
shall I?
Oh.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think on the point of a business plan that I had previously mentioned, there are, you mentioned previously, and your mother mentioned during her public comments as well, that you hope to tap into, I think, a larger trend of like historic preservation tourism. And so I guess my question to you is, have you looked at any other similar types of businesses, right? For instance, I lived in Chicago for 10 years, right? There's a strong legacy, or not legacy, there's a strong market in Chicago for historic preservation tourism and including, right, Airbnbs, inns, all sorts of rentals. Have you looked at any of the other sort of places that operate in this way to sort of draw on what a business model might look like?
Throughout the country, there's other Frank Lloyd Wright inspired and Frank Lloyd Wright houses. Obviously, in Chicago, there probably is, and looked at how they operate, and yeah, I mean, a business model based on I've looked at some of those and kind of developed ideas and ways of thinking about how this would be best around, and yeah, absolutely, I have, yeah.
I'll make a motion. Okay?
Before you do, I want to ask a clarifying point to Mr. Bartley. Could we, according to my handy-dandy table here, I think we can make a motion to consider this and then make a secondary motion to table it during that motion, correct?
I'd have to look at my cheat sheet as well.
Okay. My concern is we've talked a little bit about commissioners' feelings on this, and I think we need to have a larger discussion, although we could have that discussion on the motion to table it as well. So, and when making the motion, I think you have to table it to a specific date or table it indefinitely.
Well, actually, I was going to move to deny.
Motions are made in the affirmatives. You would have to vote no in an affirmative motion.
There's a motion to deny option.
There is, I'm looking at
I don't think we've ever done it before, but.
Well, there is, I was looking at what we have in front of me. But I defer to you, Chair.
You can make whatever motion you want. I would suggest making a motion to approve, and then we could vote on it, and if it fails, it fails. That's generally how we've done things.
Okay.
Well, then I'll make a motion to approve. How about that?
Okay.
All right. You guys are having a duel tonight.
We're doing
It's not a duel. It's an act.
It's good public. It's good public discourse.
I'll pass the hat to you now.
All good discourse.
All right. Let me pull up my motion. So I move to recommend approval of Ordinance 1529, a conditional rezoning request from Michael Zawicki to amend the zoning use district map of Chapter 50 zoning of the Code of Ordinances to rezone the .3 acre parcel located at 730 Grove Street from R2, medium density single family residential district, to RM32, City Center Multiple Family Residential District for the following reasons. The land uses allowable under the new zoning district are compatible with other zoning districts and land uses in the surrounding area. Public services would not be significantly adversely impacted by future development of the property proposed for rezoning. And 3, the uses allowed under the proposed rezoning would be equally or better suited to the area as uses allowed under the current zoning of the land. And actually, I'm going to maybe phone a friend to Mr. Bartley here, because the recommendation of approval is conditioned upon the following.
You could just say the following conditions cited in the site plan.
Okay, I just wasn't
For
sure
the
if those are,
applicant-
these are not the same conditions, though, as the conditional rezoning
No.
for B, okay. Conditioned upon the following 6 conditions.
Moved by Commissioner Denault. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Chapin. So, discussion. I think we've had some. We've kind of steered into discussion already. I think some good points have been made.
I have sort of a procedural
Commissioner Overby?
question.
Yeah.
So if we deny this rather than postponing it,
Correct.
what are the potential next steps for the applicant?
I think I don't know if there would be potential next steps as this current application. They would have to come forward with a different application, right? Or we could
No,
reconsider a
your
denial.
action,
Yeah.
any motion tonight, except for postponement, a motion to approve or a failed motion to approve would still go to the city council as a recommendation.
Right.
So they'd still have the opportunity. If they were to turn it down at that point, then the applicant would have a chance to reapply with different conditions.
Thank you.
Okay. Or if we postpone it, we could take it up at a later meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I may, if you feel that I guess I would see postponement as appropriate if you feel that you need more information. And in that case, I'd ask for some clarity on what information exactly you need. But that postponement will be to a separate date. And Mr. Chair, I think I was confused because in my cheat sheet, I had table as keep it on the table for the same meeting, to bring it up at the same meeting, postpone to a future date. And that was where I was confused. So
Okay.
we would not want to nest a table motion. You could have a table motion for an active motion because you'd be bringing it back up in the same meeting.
Okay.
You would not be able to postpone.
So
During
if we table this, we have to bring it up again tonight, is what you're saying? Okay. So we can't postpone it?
You can postpone.
Oh, okay.
You just postpone to a different date.
I feel like you're
To a date certain.
intentionally trying
If
to
you were to
confuse us at this
postpone.
point. Yeah, let's discuss this. So I have some thoughts, but I want to hear everyone else's thoughts first.
I'm good.
Commissioner Denault?
I think I've previously made my feelings in support of this very clear, right, in that it is part of a larger trend for historic preservation tourism, right? It brings, I think, more protections to a historically significant building. But I think, one of the things that I was thinking a lot about as I was considering this again was the vote that we made back in November on this, right, in which we approved it 5-1. And that was just for the rezoning up to RM32. That was without any conditions. And so in some ways, I do feel like the conditions that are now being put upon it actually provide us with more protections than the previous vote that we had approved. And I understand that, right, we are a different commission now with different members, but I have some discomfort with the sort of yo-yoing back and forth for this applicant, right, approving, then denying, then, but that is just my feelings.
I think that's a valid point.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Overby?
So I recognize the applicant's cherishing the house, the neighborhood, and the city, and the things that you would like to do, and those all make good sense to me. I'm going to vote to not approve this, and the reason why is that I'm giving great weight to those people that live in the neighborhood and how they want to preserve the neighborhood and their views of what their neighborhood should be. So that's my thinking on this proposal.
Yeah, valid points. And that's the point I've honestly been struggling with, because I hear a lot from the public about how they want to preserve this home that
Right.
that people admire. preserve the character of it, preserve the historic nature of the neighborhood, and I'm just trying to think down the line of what's going to happen, especially with this being a conditional rezoning. That would ensure that the use remains as this historic home. It's not used as a student rental. It's used as, what was the term Commissioner Denault used? Tourism.
Historic preservation
Historic
tourism.
preservation tourism. It's not a significant deviation from the master plan. It's not spot zoning. It's aligned with the properties that are to the south of it. So, in an odd way, approving this ensures that the historic nature and intent of that home is preserved. Whereas if you deny this, who knows what happens if the master plan goes through and it gets rezoned. You could have it demolished and an apartment building could be put there. So or it could remain as a student rental as it is today. So overall, like what's the best use for the community? Is it as a Airbnb, or is it as a student rental as it is now, or is it some other use? But unfortunately, before us now is just this application. That's all we really can consider at this point. The more I think about this, the more I don't think I would support it unless there was 2 additional changes made to the conditions. I think the intent of the applicant is clear that they don't want to use this as a fraternity or a sorority. I think if it is the desire to approve this, I think those should be added as conditions to absolutely expressly state, so there's no ambiguity, that it cannot be used as a fraternity house. And then I think the wording of, condition number 3, where the property shall be used as a non-owner occupied bed and breakfast per the applicant. Again, that's kind of nonsense because we don't really have a definition of what a bed and breakfast is. Why would we care if it's the owner occupying it or not the owner occupying it? So I'd be in favor of rewording that particular condition. But those are my thoughts in general. Just wanted to open it up and see if there's any additional comments, particularly from Commissioner Williams, because she always has good ones.
It's true, though.
I'm really torn on this one. I voted in favor of this at the last time that this was before us, but I think what we haven't mentioned and what I think we can't fail to recognize is the city council said no. So at this point, we're looking at the conditions that are being presented, and are we persuaded by these conditions to recommend this to council? Because again, we're not making the decision, we're making a recommendation, and I don't think we can turn a blind eye to the fact that they've already said no. So do we feel strongly about these conditions? And I'm really torn. Clearly, the neighbors are very concerned about this property being turned into a party house. That's their language, not mine. And I guess I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about the specificity of the conditions and the plan for how it's going to be used. I find the issue about the historic nature of the property and your comments and your mother's comments to be very compelling, on the other hand. I think it would be a higher use of that property to highlight those features of that property, to market that in that way. I think it would be good for the block, good for the city. But I remain uncomfortable about our conversation and about the conditions and about the likelihood that council would be persuaded. So that's where I'm at.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
With Mr. Bartley or with anyone? We're currently just voting on the zoning change.
Correct.
Not
Yeah,
on the
just-
conditions, right? We have the opportunity to further discuss the conditions. Because I would agree with you, Commissioner Williams. I would probably recommend changes to some of these conditions too. But I think moving this forward with council understanding that we are doing so, knowing that there are conditions. They sent it back, they rejected it because there were not better guardrails. And now I think having those guardrails and being able to iterate on them in the future, that helps me, I think, be able to be more comfortable voting yes now, knowing that this will come back to us.
But these conditions are part of your motion.
Yeah,
As written.
They are not.
Yes.
I think you'll get another bite at the apple, though, is the
do
point
like
you were trying to
apples.
making.
If As far as amending conditions, if that's the question or if that's desire, the zoning ordinance requires that, let me read from it. The offer of conditions may be amended during the process of rezoning consideration, provided that any amended or additional conditions are voluntarily offered by the owner in writing, signed, dated, and made part of the record of proceeding. So I would suggest that if you have a problem with specific conditions and want to amend those, that's where postponement could be very useful, to give the applicant a chance to rewrite the conditions or amend them voluntarily, but knowing exactly how he should be volunteering those conditions. So I think if that's the intent, I would suggest postponement to give the applicant time to change the conditions with guidance. If not, I think it's totally appropriate to keep going.
So, two questions or points I'm going to make here. So you're saying that because it's a conditional rezoning, we can't make changes to the conditions that are before us like we could with a typical site plan?
Because the conditions are voluntarily offered by the applicant, you can give guidance on how you want to see those voluntary offered conditions changed, but it's still up to the applicant to amend or withdraw conditions, which they can do anytime prior to the final rezoning action by the city council. Provided that if the conditions change, the city council could remand this case back to the planning commission if it would materially change the application. Does that make sense?
To clarify, we can't change the conditions, and the applicant has to change the conditions. So we can suggest to the applicant conditions that we want to be changed.
Correct. With the conditional rezoning, the rezoning is yes, I guess to answer your question narrowly, you cannot change the conditions. You can suggest, I would say very narrowly, what the conditions should be that you would approve, and then give the applicant time to offer those conditions, new conditions as amended in writing, signed and dated according to the ordinance.
Understood. And then my second point I was going to make is I don't know how much that's going to move the needle, frankly, at this point, and I think the applicant's been yo-yoed back and forth a lot on this. There's not a clear ordinance that they can use, and this is the best plan, and then they took some feedback from council and tried to make it even more restrictive with a conditional rezoning. So I guess I'd open it up to the commission to see what others have to think, and if not, we can just vote on it or table this or postpone this specifically.
Well, I do think if we were to offer suggestions,
please do.
They would be contingent upon that commissioner's suggestions unless we're voting on all of the conditions to recommend. It would seem to me, which sort of further complicates this. I don't think we're talking about amending anything in the motion that was read right now. I think we're in a different conversation.
Correct. We
Right.
can't amend.
Exactly
So essentially what you would do
Just
is,
want to clarify
in
that.
conjunction with
Yep.
postponing this
Yep.
another day, you'd make.
Yeah, so in my mind, we have
Several
a
comments.
motion on the table. And if we, after we vote on that, I guess we could reconvene this conversation. That's not the right word. We could begin this conversation again about what conditions we would be. No, you're saying no to that. I'm
I
not
don't think so,
advocating
because
for
then we
that.
would be rejecting the
Okay,
proposal.
I'm
so
not
then they would-
advocating for that.
That proposal
So-
would then go to council
Okay.
as a rejected recommendation
Okay.
from the
I'm good.
planning commission, and
I'm
then
good.
council would have to send it
Okay.
back to us with the
Okay.
conditions, right? Did I characterize that?
Yep.
That's right.
There are two options, right, or to either table or.
Postpone.
Well,
Yeah.
Postpone or vote on my motion.
Yes, and I think if we are to postpone this, I think we have to be absolutely clear with the applicant about what changes we would like to see as far as the conditions are concerned, and that at this point would just be verbal feedback from this commission. So, at this point, motion's on the table to consider this. If somebody wants to make a recommendation to postpone this, either indefinitely or to a later date as determined, those are the two options we really have at this point.
But if they want to postpone to
To vote on the motion to approve, which if it doesn't get enough votes would essentially be a reject recommendation to council, or you could make a recommendation to postpone this to a later meeting with some advice to the applicant about what potential conditions they could change for this application.
And if I may, just because of the, as you were mentioning earlier, you'd like to see the motions in the affirmative, and if those fail, then it would be essentially the same as a denial.
Yeah.
Because of that, I would suggest that if there's interest in postponement, then Commissioner Denault would withdraw her motion before we vote on it, because that would be, if you vote on it, that's a decision.
Yeah.
So,
I defer to the commission at this point. I think the two options are as clear as they can be.
I think I would be willing to withdraw my motion if someone spoke up loudly for tabling.
Postponing.
Postponing.
and we just had a parliamentary procedure training, so that's why I'm nitpicking on that,
Yeah.
on that term. You'll get invited to the next one.
I mean, if anybody cares what I think, I'm much more in favor of postponing it and reviewing the conditions here and adding conditions, but I think we have to be clear about what those conditions are. But again, I'm not going to make the motion.
You know, let me add, I was not here for the November meeting. And so, in my mind, I think those are heavier voices, those that were here, and can talk about the yo-yo and the credibility with a member of our community. If you believe that we should postpone, then I would support that, just because of your knowledge of what happened in November, and your experience with that dialogue. So I have to defer. I would listen loudly if those that were here in November would prefer to postpone.
Commissioner Hendricks?
Sounds like to me the applicant, he'll go either way. So I feel as though that if we do postpone and we do give recommendation to him, I don't see him declining that. So the way that I look at it is we should figure out what we want to recommend for him to revise his request, or we vote on it. It's the way I look at it, because I think we dancing around a little bit. So that's what I recommend.
Noted. Thank you for the concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many voices then who would feel better with postponement. And right, I would also feel better with postponement if it meant that this would move forward, right, to be approved. And so I will withdraw my motion.
Would you like to make a motion to postpone? And then what is the next planning commission meeting?
The next planning commission is April 24th.
So April 24th?
Yeah, so I withdraw my previous motion and I move to postpone this until April 24th.
Moved by Commissioner Denault, seconded by Commissioner Hendricks. Any discussion on this? And I think we can, after the vote, give feedback to the applicant. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, let's do a roll call.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to postpone this to April 24th. Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yes?
Commissioner Denault?
Yes.
Commissioner Hendricks?
Yes.
Commissioner Overby?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
And Chair Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay. You guys have it?
Yep. And then as far as feedback, I think you heard my comment about adding a condition that this shall not be used as a fraternity or sorority. And others can chime in on this portion too, but really I heard a lack of clarity on what the overall business plan is going to be for this bed and breakfast, is in regards to if you're going to have the owner or a non-owner staying there, and that condition needs to reflect what the business plan is. And I think we, in general, need more clarification on what the business plan is going to be for this proposal for it to get enough support. With that, Commissioner Boyd?
I agree with your comments you just said. We talked a lot about the history of the house, and either we're going to have someone staying there or not, or kind of watching over. What I didn't really hear was, if I'm going to go rent a room or a floor at this house, if no one's going to be there to let me in or whatever, how am I going to get any history on this house? I mean, you obviously know I'm not a big history person, so if I rent this place, me and my wife go there or whatever, is there going to be someone to teach me anything about this house and the history of it? There is going to be someone there. Okay.
I have all the original blueprints for the house, which is like this thick, and I mean, my plan would be to display all those, possibly in the great room would be a great place to do it. Along with just that would be a big part of the experience.
See, I would like to hear some of that.
And also the caretaker being able to guide the visitors through that experience and history of the house, and I think that would be a big part of the draw of staying there. I think that is a big part of the draw of anyone at the house, obviously. But learning about all that is one of the main objectives for my applying and doing this. Period. Displaying stuff, offering stuff, that they can read through. I mean, obviously, there's tons of Frank Lloyd Wright books out there and Frank Lloyd Wright stuff, which would be, which I'd love to furnish the house with tons of Frank Lloyd Wright and kind of give that whole experience, but also offer, the information behind it and the history about it and the history, of the actual architect on the house and his relation to Frank Lloyd Wright. And all of that, yes, it would be a huge part of it. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And I also agree that I would like to see your business plan. I don't know what the Wild Goose does, and I don't, I have no background on that. And so when we ask about a business plan, I don't really want to hear about what Wild Goose does. I want to hear what you plan to do at this location. Just give me an idea, I want to be able to imagine it and what's going to be. I mean, I want to know, how are you going to market this place? How are you going to get people to come there? What's it going to look like? Are you just going to put it like on Airbnb? Like, where's it going to go?
No, I really want any connection with Airbnb. I want it to feel like a higher experience. I wouldn't list on Airbnb at all.
So how would I
think it would have its own draw, through my interpretation is, if you come to East Lansing right now, you got what? Where are you going to stay? Hotels, right? You got a bunch of hotels. You got one bed and breakfast. That's cool. For what it is, what it offers. But the hotels that you can stay in any city and the one bed and breakfast that's there doesn't give you any, kind of the architectural draw and experience that this house does. That is huge to people. I mean, I have people, all the time that will stop by at the house and just ask if they can walk through it, because they've heard about it or they know about it, and allowing them to do that is, and then I end up talking to them for a while and they ask tons of questions about it, and they either know about the house or they're huge Frank Lloyd Wright fans or they're huge architectural fans and historic fans in general, and that's what I want to draw on. I think that alone is compelling to enough people to that would want to come and stay in the house. Yeah. But the whole Airbnb thing I completely want to be opposite of that. I want nothing to do with that sort of draw to the, no. How I'd advertise it, if it even needed advertised, I haven't really got there, but no, nothing like the Airbnb thing. I wouldn't put it on Airbnb at all, no.
So that speaks for me as well. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. That's what we're looking for when next we meet.
So you'd be looking for additional information, answering these questions.
We have to pin
Are there
down,
specific conditions that were offered that
the conditions
you'd hope to see amended?
Yeah, I think.
I don't think I'd want to condition it on this necessarily, but I was pleased to hear that they applied for historic designation with the city, right? You said the city.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how long that process takes even in general, but
We'll probably have the Historic District Commission first consider it next month.
Okay.
And then it would have to go through the city council process to change the ordinance.
Understood. Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? If not- Oh, Commissioner Hendricks?
Well, actually, for the commission, for us all, would we like to see someone there 24/7? Would we want someone there occupying the space? Is that something that we want to condition with, or do we want them at least there to greet the guests? I think it goes back to what Commissioner Boyd was saying. How are you gonna get inside? How are you gonna?
Yeah, if I could just touch on that, yeah. I guess in my mind, what I'm thinking is, you know, and if people, if it's preferred that somebody actually be there, that's fine, you know, 24/7. In my head, what I was thinking was that there would be somebody, maybe multiple people. Obviously, the house needs cleaned before and after. You know, person stays every day and night. But that there would be somebody that lives close by that that comes and lets people in, explains everything, takes them through the house, gives them the tour, gives them the background of the house, the architecture, and that's a lot. It would definitely be a full-time job, and somebody would be there, whether that person cleans also or doesn't. But their full-time job would be greeting the guests every day for a good part of the day, and explaining that, and being local and close by, if not living there, then local or close by anyway, so that they could respond to anything, answer any questions, or just entertain the guests at the house.
Just something to think about.
No, I think
Commissioner
we're
Williams,
on
then
the right
Boyd.
kind of thing that we're looking for.
Mhm.
That condition number one, as currently stated, property only to be used as a non-owner occupied bed and breakfast or inn. Okay, inn has been removed. But because the city doesn't define what a bed and breakfast is, because there's a lot of different kinds of rental opportunities out there in the market right now, Airbnb, VRBO, other kinds of short-term rentals. We're kind of in this, don't really know what you mean by that condition that your request for rezoning is hinging on. So if you could provide more detail about what do you mean by property only to be used as a bed and breakfast?
Like I just explained, though.
But I mean, in terms of when you go back and if you go back and look at trying to redraft that number one,
Sure.
what we're looking for is detail. What we're looking for is, what do you mean by bed and breakfast?
And
What does that mean? Does that mean somebody's going to live there? Does that mean you're going to have a host? Does that mean guests are going to be greeted in person? I mean, what are those kinds of things that are important to define something as a bed and breakfast in your mind? Because remember, your request to change the zoning is conditioned on our approval of how you define that.
Yes.
So give that some thought, and maybe we can get there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the root of the issue, right? Is we just need a better understanding of what the plan is there. I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not someone needs to be living there in the building. I do think it would be helpful if you could clarify all of the things that you had mentioned about the role of that person. Maybe you're specifying that they're available to the people that live there. They live close by, whatever you want to specify. But I think that whatever decision you make needs to be clear.
Yeah, I would also say, I think I with Chair Sullivan, I don't particularly mind if someone is there or not, right? I'm thinking of the two Frank Lloyd Wright houses that were in my neighborhood in Chicago, right?
Okay.
That were offered as rentals. One was a B&B that had full-time live-in caretakers, and one was a house that you could rent, and the caretaker would be there to give you a tour and then would leave for
Yes.
the evening. And I think they were both very successful, and they were right next to each other. And I think it's up to you to decide which business model is what you want to do. Because I think what Commissioner Williams is asking for, and Commissioner Boyd and Hendricks and Ray, just clarity
Sure.
about what your vision is. I would love, and again, I don't know that this needs to be a condition, but one of the really wonderful things that the M.L. Bach House in Chicago did do is they offered community tours on Wednesdays, right? I think that would be really wonderful to have an opportunity for community members to be able to see the house as well. And maybe that's part of the job of the caretaker. But again, that's up to your business plan. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to what you come up with.
Good comments. Commissioner Boyd?
I agree with you guys. I don't care if the person lives there or not, but I do, like Commissioner Williams said, more detail. You know, if I'm staying there and it's midnight and a pipe breaks, who am I calling? Or if the heat goes out, who do I call? Like, you just need to have like a backup plan and let us know, like, what are you planning?
Yeah, I just have a question then for Landon. I know you said when I was drafting the conditions, I kind of felt like I had to be very narrow with, like, I couldn't go into explaining too much.
Okay.
And if I went into that, I just feel like that's too much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to, of course. I just trying to find the fine point.
You'll want to offer conditions that will, I guess, I think when I guided you before, I was saying be as broad as you can be, but as narrow language as possible, right? So that you want to cover what you want, but make sure that your words are sort of narrowly defining and being very clear. I think that the additional sort of commentary and explanations would be separate from the conditions. So you'd want to bring amended conditions in writing, sign dated, reflecting what you've heard tonight. And then I think it would be totally reasonable and advisable to also include some sort of narrative with that.
I can do it that way.
Explain what you're offering now and what your understanding is. And a lot more clarity, I think,
To be clear, though, the owner-occupied and the fraternity sorority issue, I think, should be conditions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any additional comments or questions?
Owner occupied is a condition? Are you saying that?
Whatever the determination of the applicant is, they need to clarify that
Clarity
that
around
provision
that
is
issue. Clarity
unclear
around that
to me, and you know.
Yeah, to me, just to, not to be a dead horse, but owner occupied is kind of not all that pertinent to my concern. I just want someone there, a host, a caretaker. I want some idea of that. Whether the owner lives there or doesn't, I guess is not as important. If that was part of the plan, I'd probably like it better, but if it isn't, it isn't. That language kind of throws me.
And ordinances I've read from other cities, I think they generally use the term local agent. So, anyways, we thought it's not as good as, what is it, the candlelight and the cool terms we're going to be discussing with the next application. So I think our points have been made clear unless there's any additional last comments. Seeing none, we will see you at the April 24th meeting.
Thank you so much.
All right, that brings us on to item number 7.3, consideration of ordinance 1530, which would amend the zoning ordinance to make changes to items related to electricity. Mr. Bartley?
Yes, thank you. So our last item tonight is ordinance 1530 for text amendments to the zoning ordinance, generally related to electricity, but I put a little asterisk there because there are some that aren't. So I just want to focus on changes that have been made to this proposed text amendments since your public hearing on February 28th, and realizing that in my staff report, it should say the commission is requested to vote tonight on a recommendation for action by City Council. So the major changes, I guess, is, and these are based on comments from discussion by the commission, from public comment, and from discussions with subject matter experts, other staff, and City Council members. Briefly, we've had a couple of requests, I should say, for historical marker signs. That's a completely new, I guess, addition to this that's not electrical at all. But essentially, it appears about 10 to 12 years ago, our ordinance was changed, and in what appears to be an oversight, historical markers were taken out of there, and now there's a allowance for a 1 square foot sign in residential zone districts. And part of why I think that it was taken out or potentially removed by accident, but there was a Supreme Court decision a few years ago based on a town in Arizona that was regulating the content of the signs And the Supreme Court decision said essentially, no, you cannot regulate content. So that's changed how we regulate signs in general. And so how we've sort of we're proposing this section is essentially saying it's a sign that is constructed and erected in this area for the purpose of recognizing. So I'm not really, I guess, suggesting or requiring a specific content, but the purpose of the sign is what we're looking for as far as a historical marker. We've had applicants that have come forward with 14 square foot signs, with 30 square foot signs, with 50 square foot signs, and we felt that a reasonable size, sort of compromise size, would be 24 square feet. You're certainly welcome to change that if you feel like that's too large or too small. So that's one change that I've introduced that's new to this discussion. Any questions about that before I move on to the really electrical parts? I should say that the historical marker signs are said you cannot have them be illuminated, either inside or outside, so that would be where the electricity comes in. Also with signs, as you know, the amendments seek to change the regulations about electronic display signs, specifically by setting a maximum lighting level. The current code requires maximum light, or excuse me, an average of 2,000 nits. I think I tried to explain last time the difference between nits and foot candles, but nits is essentially the amount of light that's coming out of each the light source in the source itself. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. But the brightness coming out of the sign, average of 2,000 nits, is considered. The average is very difficult to measure a sign brightness with, so instead we are looking at a maximum nits, maximum absolute brightness of 3,000 nits, which is considered which is visible during the day, not overly bright during the day, but at night it would be very bright, which is why we're proposing to retain the proposed language of at night limiting your light levels to an amount in relation to ambient light conditions. And that's where we introduce foot candles as that measurement, because that's much easier to measure in relation to other light. For exterior lighting, there were some questions about lights shining out of a stairwell, for example, of an apartment building, a nice bright light shining across property into somebody else's house, and they said, well, that's an interior light, but I'm still feeling the effects. So we're modifying the language that regulates outdoor lighting to also include interior lights that have the effect of acting as an exterior light. We noticed an error that we noted, I think, last time during the public hearing, where it said the roof-mounted solar energy systems can exceed the height maximum by 18 feet, and that should have been 18 inches, so we've made that change. Modified to allow the area under ground-mounted solar energy systems to not count against ground coverage. So the zoning ordinance has maximum ground coverage requirements where so much of the property has to remain completely untouched. That ground coverage requirement would be essentially ignored for if native grasses or ground cover or pollinator garden or rain gardens are planted beneath those solar panels and for utility scale or ground-mounted systems. I'm not sure how many rain gardens we'd have under solar panels, but we wanted to include that just in case. That was a recommendation. And then finally, as far as EV charging, we added a definition of EV-ready parking spaces. There's been some recent discussion with some recent proposals about introducing EV chargers. There was some discussion at the City Council meeting about a couple of specific proposals where they were interested in EV-ready parking spaces, which is essentially a space that has the infrastructure installed already so that you could fairly easily install an EV charging station down the road. I shouldn't say down the road, but at that space, right? But in the future. And I set a requirement of 2 EV-ready spaces per parking lot of 10 spaces or more. EV-ready spaces are not particularly expensive, but essentially they just make a lot of sense to install when you're installing a parking lot, and are a good way to set the site up for EV charging success in the future without installing those charging stations at the time. So we're suggesting 2 EV-ready spaces for parking lots of 10 spaces or more. And also the existing threshold for level 2 charging stations is 1 required station for parking lots with 50 or more required parking spaces. That's the current regulation. And also for every 50 spaces beyond that, an additional level 2 charger is required, and that's the current regulation. What we're proposing is to clarify the language to say, yes, 1 level 2 charging station per 50 spaces. When you have a 50 space parking lot, regardless of whether or not those 50 spaces are required, that's a nuance. But then reduce the threshold for additional chargers from every additional 50 spaces to every additional 10 spaces, mostly because I think it would support our goals of seeing more EV charging stations in town. And when you start constructing large parking lots of 60 spaces or more, for example, the I guess economies of scale, the cost of those chargers related to the overall project cost start to come down and start to become less significant. So that's where I'm proposing, I guess, a lower threshold for additional chargers. Beyond that, I haven't made any changes from last time. I'm happy to go through any of those proposed, of that proposed language, even if I didn't talk about it tonight, from what would change from last time. Happy to answer any questions about anything I said.
While we're on the EV subsection, just wanted to flag some language I'd pointed out last time where it says it's on page 19 of the staff, where all chargers required by this provision shall be maintained in operational condition at all times. I think that at all times language is at worst an impossible standard, right? We just went through a period of supply chain issues. What if there's vandalism? There's a lot of scenarios I could envision there. And then I think at best that phrase is just redundant. It's just not needed. I don't know what it accomplishes. So I would suggest striking from at to times on that last line.
All right, so the final sentence would be, all chargers required by this provision shall be maintained in operable condition.
Operational condition. Yeah.
Operational.
Yeah. I just,
Got it. Yeah, we can make that.
aside from that, I mean, you gave a significant overview, and there's a lot of terms and metrics in there that I can't pretend to fully understand, but
Please don't ask me to explain NITs.
I'll do my best. So I guess we'll open it up to any questions for Mr. Bartley right now.
I'd say it's clear that it was really good process here, Landon. You included a wide range of people, not only from the community but outside of the community that can answer questions. I see great process here and commend you for creating that for all of us. One quick question. You said 2 charging stations per 10 spaces. So, and then you use 60. So that would require 12 charging stations for 60 parking.
No, I
spots.
apologize. I suggested 2 EV-ready EV-ready spaces for a parking lot of 10 spaces or more. When the charging stations themselves come in is at 50 spaces.
Okay.
And then 1 additional charging station for every 10 above that.
I'm glad I asked that. Okay.
So 100 space parking lot would in this case then require 6.
Okay. Okay.
So to clarify, it says your 10 parking spaces shall have at least 2 EV-ready parking spaces. So that means 10 total spaces, 8 traditional, 2 EV parking spaces, right?
Correct.
Okay. Comments or questions? Commissioner Denal?
I actually found it on page 25 just very useful. Foot candles measure illuminance and nit measure luminance. That was actually very clarifying for me. People are shaking their heads like, what?
Pretty sure you just made that up.
It was very helpful. Like I understand everything now. But my question actually, the provision for planting of native grasses or pollinator gardens, are there any definitions about like what is a native plant or a native garden?
We do have lists available of species. Those aren't in the zoning ordinance, but they are in other ordinances.
Okay.
So I think that it certainly wouldn't be a bad idea to, I guess, more closely define pollinator garden, rain garden, native plants, or include references, if you'd like me to add those as a recommendation.
Yeah, only because I was just wondering, like, you know, if someone like puts in some panels and then like plants a whole bunch of like bamboo, which is clearly an invasive plant in Michigan, and they're like, well, I planted for the pollinators. Like, there's no like who is deciding and who is enforcing what is a native plant or a pollinator garden. So yeah, I think having some references or some specifications would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, we're ready for motion?
Commissioner Boyd, come on.
He's ready. He's pulling up.
Oh, do you want to do it?
Go ahead, do it. Commissioner Williams.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval by the East Lansing City Council of Ordinance 1530, which amends the zoning code and other sections of the city code, including but not limited to items relating to electricity.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Chapin. So I think that would require the addition of the language that I had recommended to be struck.
I'm sorry, yes.
But I can make that as a separate motion if it's easier.
Okay,
So
let's do
I make a motion to strike the three words at all times on page 19 in subdivision 2 regarding electric vehicle charging stations being operational. I think that's sufficient. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Should this be a second motion or
It's
a
a second. You do
friendly
the-
amendment? Is that the way you do it?
Well, parliamentary procedure training
I don't
said
know.
that
See, I
friendly
don't do
amendments, friendly amendments do not exist, and you
Oh,
basically just have to do
darn.
them as traditional amendments.
So, Mr. Chair, you're proposing an amendment to the motion that would strike those three words. Did you also want to include in your amendment motion to add definitions of native plants, pollinator gardens, rain gardens, and to?
Yes. So both of
I think that was
those.
it.
Excellent.
Please don't make me repeat that.
Did I miss any other amendments that were brought up?
I think so.
So that's your
Yeah.
amendment.
And then who seconded it? Was it Overby? Okay. For the minutes, seconded by Commissioner Overby. Any discussion on that revision to the original motion? Seeing
Nope.
none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So we are on to the discussion component of the original motion. So is there any other comments or suggested revisions or anything from the commission?
I appreciate the staff work on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much.
Completely agree. It looks like a lot of work went into this, very technical in nature, and thank you for your technical expertise and input you got from other technical experts to make this possible. So with that, I think a vote is in order. I think we can just do a simple voice vote on this one. So all those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So this one is on to council. I'm not sure when they're going to be taking it up, but at a later city council meeting. All right, that brings us on, since we have no new business, that brings us on to item number 9, commissioner concerns. Is there any concerns from commissioners? All right. Seeing none, motion to adjourn is in order. Moved by Commissioner Overby, seconded by Commissioner Denault. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:08 p.m.